Cause of death tonight of Ivana Trump. The medical examiner says she died from blunt impact injuries to her torso. After a fall at 73, Ivana Trump broke her silence, and what came out was nothing like anyone expected. A violent scene hidden in a film, a gold-drenched townhouse where she passed alone. A will that left her children guessing for decades. She smiled, stayed quiet, and played the perfect role. I was first tramp. Lady. First tramp lady. Yeah, not the first tramp lady that I know 'cause people. And she jumped on it, but behind closed doors, something darker was always there. And now the truth is finally slipping out from secret power struggles to chilling final choices. This is the side of Ivana they never wanted you to see. Join us, the making of a Trump. She was icy blonde and perfectly composed. A woman who made her way from a small industrial town in communist Czechoslovakia to the glittering heart of 1980s. Manhattan high society, but behind the fur coats and diamond necklaces was a woman who fought tooth and nail for every inch of the life she built. And lost. Ivana Trump didn't just marry into power. She helped construct it long before she became a tabloid headline. Ivana was quietly designing the gold-plated world that Donald Trump would later claim as his own. But what horrors did she endure behind closed doors to hold her place in that empire? What dark truths did she bury beneath the glitz? And when she finally broke that silence, why was it so disturbing? Ivan Marie Zelnova was born in 1949 in the town of Zlin, then known as Gotwaldov, in what is now the Czech Republic. At the time, Czechoslovakia was under strict communist rule. But even in that tightly controlled world, Ivana stood out from a young age. She trained rigorously in competitive skiing, a sport that granted her some mobility outside the Iron Curtain. Her father was a strict disciplinarian who reportedly enrolled her in skiing to toughen her up. He also encouraged her to learn multiple languages tools she would later use to navigate elite Western society. She eventually made her way out of Czechoslovakia, first to Austria, then to Canada, where she began to craft her new identity in Montreal. She enrolled at McGill University, perfected her English, and started modeling for department store catalogs, giving her access to luxury to travel and to powerful men. In the early 1970s, Ivana married an Austrian skier, in what many believed was a marriage of convenience, done to secure an Austrian passport and escape the Soviet sphere that marriage quietly dissolved. But the passport remained with her new identity in hand. Eva moved to New York City, and that's where everything changed. She met Donald Trump in 1976. The official story goes like this. She was in town for a modeling gig, and he saw her in a restaurant. They immediately clicked, but Ivana herself would later suggest something deeper. Donald was charming, but also calculating just like her. He wanted a wife who looked like a model, but acted like a CEO. And Ivana fit the bill perfectly. They married in 1977. It didn't take long for Ivana to become an integral part of Trump's growing real estate empire. This wasn't a trophy wife situation. Ivana took the reins on major projects. She was named Vice President of Interior Design at the Trump Organization, where she oversaw the famously gaudy look of Trump Tower mirrors marble, and enough gold trim to make Versailles blush. She also became the CEO of Trump's Castle, a New Jersey casino, and managed the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan after Trump bought it in 1988. According to many insiders, she didn't just manage these properties, she ruled them. Ivana wasn't just building hotels. She was building the Trump brand before branding was even a business model. And the media noticed by the 1980s, Ivana and Donald were regulars on the Manhattan social scene. They dined with fashion icons, posed for glossy spreads in Vanity Fair, and made the front page of the New York Post as often as movie stars. Ivana's blonde bouffant and signature accent became instantly recognizable. But not everything glitters just because it's covered in gold leaf. Even at the height of their empire-building years, rumors swirled of tension behind the scenes, and for the most part, she kept the real story quiet until now. What really happened behind closed doors in The Apprentice? A film released in late 2024. There is one scene that no one was prepared for, one that theatergoers describe as unbearable. To watch, it depicts Ivana Trump, played with haunting precision by actress Maria Baklava, just moments after a brutal act. She's frozen, staring blankly ahead as she retreats from a room where her husband Donald Trump forced himself on her in a fit of rage. It's not just a scene meant to disturb. It's a direct reenactment of a real event, an allegation Ivanka Trump herself described under oath during her 1989 divorce proceedings. She said it happened, and for over 30 years, the world looked away. The details were first made public in the book, Lost Tycoon, The Many Lives of Donald J. Trump by Harry Hurt. The third published in 1993 in it, Hurt cites Ivana's sworn deposition, which described an incident during the breakdown of their marriage. Donald was furious over a failed cosmetic procedure, allegedly performed by a plastic surgeon Ivana had once recommended to her husband. Feeling humiliated in front of his peers, he entered their room and forced himself on her. The account included physical aggression, verbal degradation, and a complete disregard for consent. According to the book, she told friends afterward that she felt violated. She later used the term "a very violent episode" when referring to what happened in the wake of the book's release. And just as Donald Trump was preparing for a presidential run, Ivana issued a carefully worded statement during a divorce. Couples often say things in anger. She wrote, "I refer to this incident as a violation, but I do not want my words to be interpreted in a literal or criminal sense." That line was widely viewed by legal and political analysts as an attempt to neutralize the damage, whether for her own legal protection, the well-being of her children, or out of loyalty to the brand she helped build. No one knows for sure. But Ivana never outright denied that something happened. She never said it was untrue. She just softened the terminology. A move often seen in high-profile divorce cases when settlements and custody arrangements are on the line. Legal experts point out that the initial statement was part of a deposition, a sworn testimony made under penalty of perjury. The retraction, on the other hand, was a press statement. So what do we actually know? First, Ivana made the claim in court documents. Second, the book Lost Tycoon. Long buried and out of print includes a full account of the incident, based on those documents and conversations with people close to Ivana. Third, neither Ivana nor Donald ever sued the author or publisher for defamation, for the claim was never publicly disproven. Just quietly walked back for decades. This part of Ivana's story was reduced to a footnote. Tabloids obsessed over her fashion, her divorce settlement, and her infamous one-liners, but they rarely, if ever, touched the deeper, darker elements of her marriage. But now with the release of The Apprentice, the ground has shifted. The film shows a direct confrontation with the reality Ivana once described. The power imbalance, the rage, the fear, the silence afterward. Maria Baklava portrays Ivana as someone who lives in gold-plated cages of her own making. In interviews, she wanted to portray not just Ivana's elegance, but her buried fear. You can't understand Ivana Trump if you don't understand what she was forced to swallow. She told The Guardian that line stayed with many viewers long after the credits rolled. And what about the children at the time of the divorce? Donald Jr., Ivanka, and Eric were still young by the early two. Ivanka had become the polished face of the next Trump generation, working alongside her father, promoting the brand, defending his character. Did Ivana stay silent to protect her daughter's future? The Trump family has not issued any statement about the film. No lawsuit has been filed. No public denial has been made. That silence for many speaks volumes, while Ivana's allegations were the first of their kind to enter public record. They would not be the last in the years that followed. A steady stream of women would come forward, each describing disturbingly similar experiences. Involving Donald Trump, one of the earliest public allegations came from Jill Hart, a former business associate, who claimed Trump cornered her in his daughter Ivanka's bedroom at Mar-a-Lago in the early 1990s. She filed a lawsuit in 1997, alleging he groped her repeatedly over the course of their business relationship. The suit was eventually dropped, but not because she recanted. She later reaffirmed her story in interviews and court filings. Years later, it just disappeared. Swallowed by legal maneuvering and media apathy, then came The Apprentice. Not the film, but the reality show. It launched in 2004 and brought Trump into millions of American homes as a no-nonsense boss. But even this carefully controlled set wasn't immune to whispers. Several contestants and crew members later claimed he made crude, inappropriate remarks behind the scenes. Some alleged that he would deliberately walk into dressing rooms unannounced. "I can do anything." He famously bragged in the Access Hollywood tape words, dismissed at the time as locker room talk, but which in hindsight feel more like a confession. So where does this leave us with a film that dares to believe Ivana the first time? With a performance that gives voice to the woman behind the headlines, and with a lingering, unsettling question. If this is what she endured, and if this is what she said in a sworn statement, what else did she never say? Section 3. Death in the Townhouse. Mystery Timing and Whispers on July 14th, 2022. Ivana Trump was found lifeless at the bottom of a grand staircase in her Upper East Side townhouse. Ivana Trump. The first wife of former U.S. President Donald Trump has died at her home in New York City, age 73. The official ruling came quickly. Blunt impact injuries to the torso. Accidental fall. No criminal investigation, no foul play. Suspected it was, according to the New York City Medical Examiner's Office, a tragic but straightforward death. But almost immediately people began to ask questions quietly, online in private circles. The kind of questions no one wanted to say out loud. Was it really an accident? And why did it happen then? At 73, Ivana was no longer the tabloid queen she once had been. She had faded from public view in recent years, spending much of her time inside the same 4-story townhouse she'd lived in. Since the early 1990s, the property located on East 64th Street was a throwback to another era. Opulent, ornate, and completely untouched by modern minimalism. Red carpets, crystal chandeliers, gilded moldings, animal print furniture. Even the bathrooms were lined in pink marble. It was excessive grand and totally hers because she lived alone when paramedics arrived at the scene that morning. They found her lying at the base of the spiral staircase. A cup of spilled coffee sat nearby. She was reportedly preparing for a trip to Saint-Tropez. Bags had been packed, outfits laid out. Her death, sudden and sharp, interrupted everything. The medical examiner's report listed her injuries and the likely fall. But beyond the official paper trail, there was no follow-up, and yet the timing was strange. Ivana was the mother of the former president's 3 oldest children, Donald Jr., Ivanka, and Eric, just days after Ivana's death. Donald Trump and 3 of their children. Donald Jr., Ivanka, and Eric were scheduled to testify under oath in a civil investigation LED by the New York Attorney General. The probe centered around alleged financial fraud involving the Trump Organization, inflated property values, misrepresented assets, and tax irregularities. It was one of the most serious legal threats the Trump family had faced in years. The depositions were delayed in the wake of Ivana's death. Publicly, the delay was framed as a family tragedy. Privately, people wondered, did Ivana know something? She had been at the center of the Trump Organization. In its early days, she had access knowledge and memory. Had she been contacted by investigators? Was she writing something? Was she planning to speak? There's no evidence to support these ideas. No leaked emails, no suspicious texts. But the lack of evidence didn't stop the speculation. In fact, it fueled it. Because in a world obsessed with visibility, Ivana's final years were lived in near total silence. And then there was the townhouse. After her death, the property was eventually listed for sale at $26.5 million. The listing highlighted its classic architecture, elevator access, and rare width for a Manhattan townhouse. But as of early 2025, the property still hasn't sold. The price has dropped repeatedly, now sitting just under $20 million. Still no takers. Real estate insiders blame the outdated interior design. Others quietly reference the manner of her death, a curiously accidental fall from the staircase. But if her death raised questions, her will raised even more. Ivana's estate was valued at over $34 million. And while the bulk of it did go to her 3 children, there were 2 beneficiaries that caught everyone off guard. Dorothy Curry, a former nanny who had helped raise the Trump children, was left a $1 million condominium in Miami Beach. Evelyn Gallet, a longtime friend from Europe, also received a notable portion of the estate. These weren't just symbolic gifts, they were calculated choices, and they sent a message. Dorothy Curry was more than just a caregiver. According to reports, she had remained close to Ivana well into adulthood. Some described her as a confidant, someone who had witnessed the Trump household from the inside. Not as a guest, but as a fixture, her inclusion in the will and the size of the gift hinted at the depth of that bond, and perhaps a statement about loyalty, or maybe gratitude, or maybe something else. Because the question that kept surfacing was simple. Why didn't Ivanka give more to her children? The Trump children. Particularly, Ivanka had built public brands around their closeness with their mother. Ivanka often credited Ivanka with shaping her work ethic and style. They appeared together in fashion campaigns, posed in interviews. But when Ivana died, Ivanka's public statement was notably short, heartbroken. She wrote over the passing of my mother. She was brilliant, charming, passionate, and wickedly funny. She shared a few childhood photos, and then silence. There was no tearful interview, and no major memorial service. Attended by world leaders, Donald Trump's eulogy was held at her funeral in Manhattan, which was private and sparsely covered. He called her a wonderful, beautiful, and amazing woman. But the language was distant, and still her choices in death suggested layers of unresolved tension. Whatever the answer, the public response was oddly muted. Major outlets covered the basic facts: her death, the will, the property listing. But there was no wave of exposés, no in-depth retrospectives. It was as if no one wanted to probe too deeply, as if even in death, Ivana Trump remained untouchable. Ivana's role in the Trump empire. She was never just a wife, not in private, not in business, and certainly not in the world. Ivana Trump helped build, long before she became a pop culture reference or a divorced socialite. With a memorable accent, she was at the very core of the Trump brand. In fact, much of what we associate with Donald Trump The gold, the marble, the excess was shaped by her hand. Ivana wasn't decorating Donald's world. She was constructing it, designing it, running it at the height of their influence. In the 1980s, Ivana Trump held multiple senior executive titles within the Trump organization. She was appointed Vice President of Interior Design, a title that sounds ornamental, until you realize she was responsible for the look and feel of Trump Tower itself, that now iconic golden glass aesthetic, often mocked for its extravagance, was very much Ivana's vision. She brought a European opulence to New York real estate that hadn't been seen in decades. Mirrored walls, polished marble, and 24-karat gold accents. These weren't just design choices. They were statements about wealth, statements about power. But Ivana didn't stop at design. She was made the CEO and president of Trump's Castle Hotel and Casino in 2018. Atlantic City, under her leadership, the property turned a consistent profit. Something not every Trump venture could claim. And she wasn't some symbolic figurehead. Former employees described her as hands-on detail, oriented and extremely demanding. She would walk the casino floors, in heels, inspect uniforms, quiz staff on procedures she reportedly once sent a server home for having chipped nail polish. This was a woman who understood brand consistency before it became a marketing buzzword. Ivana also managed the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan after Donald purchased it in 1988, and it was here that things started to shift. Though the Plaza was meant to be the crown jewel of the Trump portfolio, it soon became a battleground professionally and personally. There were rumors of disagreements over business decisions with Ivana, reportedly resisting some of Donald's more flamboyant financial moves, as the pressure of the late 1980s real estate market tightened, cracks began to show. And not just in the business. Ivana had power, but it wasn't absolute. Her authority came from Donald, and when he began to question her decisions, or simply stopped needing her. In the same way, she found herself increasingly isolated. Employees noted that Donald began appointing more male executives to roles that had once been Ivana's domain meetings. She used to lead were now being held without her. Her titles remained, but her influence was receding. Then came the affair in 1989. Donald met Marla Maples, a younger woman from Georgia, with big dreams and a disarming smile. The affair was not discreet. It was paraded through the tabloids, culminating in an infamous headline from the New York Post, where Marlo was allegedly describing Donald's talents in the bedroom. Ivana, humiliated and publicly betrayed, was left to pick up the pieces, not just of her marriage, but of her professional identity. She filed for divorce in 1990, and with that decision, her role in the Trump empire was effectively over. There's a popular quote, often attributed to Ivana. Don't get mad. Get everything she never denied saying it. In fact, she leaned into it. It became the cornerstone of her post-divorce brand, but the reality was more complicated. Ivana walked away with a reported $14 million settlement, a mansion in Connecticut, a Trump Tower apartment, and partial use of Mar-a-Lago each year on paper. It was substantial. But when measured against the billions, Donald Trump would go on to claim it was relatively modest. The settlement did not include ownership in the Trump organization. She didn't retain any formal role or influence in the company. No voting rights. No seat at the boardroom table. She went from being a CEO to an outsider, and while she remained publicly composed, those close to her said she felt the loss deeply. She had helped build the empire, and now she wasn't even allowed back inside. So why did she settle for so little? Some speculate it was exhaustion. The divorce was drawn out, brutal, and deeply public. Ivana was fighting not just for money, but for dignity. Others believe she was pressured legally, emotionally, or both to avoid revealing too much about the Trump empire's inner workings. Donald was even then image-obsessed, a courtroom battle. Exposing internal documents, family finances, or personal conduct would have been a disaster. Silence in this case had a dollar value. And Ivana may have calculated that it was safer, financially and emotionally, to walk away quietly. What's remarkable is what she did next. Rather than disappear, Ivana re-emerged. She wrote books, started fashion and beauty lines, became a regular on European talk shows. She leaned into her identity as the glamorous ex-wife who knew exactly how to survive. But behind the reinvention was something else, a lingering sense that she had been erased. In interviews, she would sometimes hint at her role in building the empire. "I ran the castle." She once said, "I ran the plaza. I did the design, and then I was fired." She said it with a smile, but the bitterness was unmistakable. Her relationship with Donald eventually thawed. They appeared together occasionally, mostly for family events. She even endorsed his presidential campaign in 2016, but her comments were often carefully phrased, even cryptic in one interview. When asked what advice she would give Melania, she replied, "He's Donald. He is who he is. You just have to live with it." She smiled as she said it, but what did that smile mean? I have no idea why she did it, 'cause I never said I'm First Lady of America. There's a haunting quality to Ivana's story, not because she lost, but because of how much she gave. She entered the marriage as an equal partner. She left it with a check and a gag order, unspoken or not. And through it all, she played the role she was expected to play. The supportive wife, the stylish executive, the silent ex. But for those paying attention, the silence was louder than the headlines. Ivana Trump was never just a socialite. She was an architect, a strategist, a brand maker, and when that brand no longer had space for her, it swallowed her whole. Even in the brand. After the divorce, Ivana Trump did not retreat. She rebranded the woman who had spent more than a decade helping shape the Trump empire, was no longer sitting in boardrooms, but she wasn't interested in disappearing either. If anything, the end of her marriage marked the beginning of her own public identity, no longer tethered to Donald's brand. Ivana began building her own fashion television books. Jewelry, she turned her last name into a product line, and her personal story into a lifestyle template. But beneath the sequence, and one-liners, was something far more calculated. Ivana wasn't just making money. She was taking back control. Her post-divorce career began almost immediately in the early 1990s. She launched multiple business ventures, starting with a clothing line that sold affordable versions of the glamorous styles she was known for. These weren't couture pieces. They were designed for everyday women who wanted a taste of Ivana's world. Structured jackets, gold accessories, faux fur, details. The clothes were marketed through mail-order catalogs and television shopping networks, like the Home Shopping Network, and later QVC. She pitched the items herself, often speaking directly to the camera in her signature accent, using phrases like, "Ladies, trust me, you'll love it." It worked. Her products sold well, not because of their quality, but because of her persona. Ivana was selling more than fabric. She was selling survival. She published several books, some autobiographical, others in the self-help genre. Her 1995 release, The Best Is Yet to Come. Coping with divorce and enjoying life again was part memoir, part motivational guide, written in a direct, sometimes biting tone. She encouraged women to never play the victim, to take what they're owed, and to always look their best, especially when facing off against an ex. It was both a personal manifesto and a public statement. She may have lost her marriage, but she hadn't lost her power. By the early two, she had become a regular guest on talk shows, panel programs, and European television specials. She appeared on reality TV, made cameos in films, and even created a brief column called Ask Ivana for Globe, a tabloid newspaper. The column offered dating advice, lifestyle tips, and blunt commentary on men love. And money. Her tone was always the same, glamorous but grounded, assertive. Without being abrasive, she knew how to walk that line better than most. One of the most revealing moments in her reinvention came much later in 2017 with the release of her memoir, Raising Trump. The book focused on her years as a mother, outlining how she raised Donald Jr., Ivanka, and Eric, largely on her own. It was carefully curated, affectionate toward her children, pragmatic about her ex-husband. She didn't criticize Donald directly, but the omissions were telling. He was there, but never central. The message was clear: I did this. Not him in interviews promoting the book. Ivana positioned herself as the real architect of the Trump children's work ethic and success. She described mornings of strict schedules, high expectations, and no-nonsense parenting. There was no room for laziness. She said, I kept them in line. The book was a success, especially among women who saw her as a figure of old-school discipline, combined with modern independence. She became, for a brief moment, the face of a very specific kind of motherhood. Wealthy, firm, stylish, and unapologetically in charge. But what really drew attention during this time was a single phrase she used while promoting the memoir in an interview with Good Morning America. Ivana referred to herself as the First Lady. She explained that she had a direct number to the White House, that she spoke to Donald regularly, and that she didn't want to interfere. But technically, as his first wife, she was the original First Lady. It was said with a smirk, but the fallout was immediate. Ivana knew what she was doing. Every word was intentional. She had spent years studying public reaction, learning how to dominate a headline without becoming tabloid fodder, unlike Melania, who preferred silence and distance. Ivana embraced the chaos. She wasn't afraid of the press. She used it. And in that moment, with one phrase, I'm the real First Lady. She stole attention from the East Wing and reminded everyone that she had been there. First, Ivana's ability to manipulate media narratives shouldn't be underestimated, where Donald used volume and controversy to control the spotlight. Ivana used timing and tone. She rarely commented on political matters. But when she did, it landed. She once referred to herself as Donald's support system, but added, I'm not involved in politics. That's not my job. It sounded deferential, but it also left open the possibility that she could be involved if she wanted. She maintained relationships with European tabloids, particularly in the Czech Republic and France, where she was still regarded as a kind of glamorous export. She gave interviews in multiple languages. She cultivated an image that appealed to old money and new ambition, and she carefully avoided becoming politically divisive. Her power was subtle, and that's what made it so effective. And that ultimately was the secret to her reinvention. Ivana Trump didn't need to reclaim the spotlight. She was the spotlight she had simply stepped aside for a while. But when she returned, she did so on her terms. Ivana the wife had disappeared long ago. Ivana the brand, however, never really went away. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Click the next video for more exciting content.